Greetings, LoreSeekers, and welcome to another episode of the Lost Archives, a Star Wars Legends lore series. So, in a previous video I spoke about the Tie AP1, also known as the Tie Mauler. I also briefly mentioned its successor. Well, today we're going to talk about that successor in great detail. To those with a bit more knowledge on the Legends material would know that I am talking about the Century Tank, also known as the TIE Crawler or the TIE Tank. I'm just going to pop an image up on the screen. As you can see from this, it is following the original design of the TIE Fighter cockpit. Same with the TIE Mauler, but it has a different strut system coming out the back. I'll explain why in a moment. And bigger treads, and it is more heavily armoured. It is quite obvious that the designers have learned from the mistakes that were very present in the TIE Mauler. To that end, it is actually the very first of the TIE range that isn't powered by twin ion engines. Instead, it was powered using twin Xanthi SSCT power generators. A bit of a step away from the twin ion engine design, but still maintaining the iconic look of the TIE Fighter. As for the producer of the tank itself, it was CNR Army Systems, a subsidiary of CNR and CNR Fleet Systems, but it never reached the same fame as the main producer of ships. Now, the tank itself can reach up to about 90 km per hour with its onboard power generators. It had a crew of 1, and there was no additional space for any passengers. Also, the notable difference as well is that it had 30 less carrying capacity than the TIE Mauler for a total of 65. Though it did have enough consumables for 5 days. Like with the TIE Mauler, if the pilot or / gunner does actually have any survival skills, he could probably live off the area if he needed to. The vehicle was controlled by both a set of hand controls and foot pedals. Now, the foot pedals were used for adjusting the vehicle's speed, direction, and various controls to do the treads, whereas the hand controls were used to fire the main weapon systems. Moving on to the weapon systems, the tank had a pair of medium blaster cannons mounted in the dual configuration on most TIE Fighter cockpit designs, but it also had a light turbo laser which was then used for dealing with harder targets, which meant the tank had actually got considerable firepower, at least in the energy weapons department. Unlike its predecessor, the TIE tank didn't have a self-destruct function. This was because at the time of the production of these tanks, the Empire was moving away from wasting resources like it had done during the Palpatine's rule, though there are designs of this tank as far back as 0 BBY. Though this tank wasn't really put into full production due to the continued use of the TIE Mauler project, I do think as the time went on and the Empire started phasing out some of its old designs, this eventually did see production, though it only did see full production after the Battle of Endor. This is during the time that Xanthi CNR technologies no longer had to have the boot heel of the Empire on its throat, so they'd started to produce new and more interesting designs that they were restricted from doing before. Now, reusing this old design of the TIE Mauler project in creation of this new tank was seen as a good way of being cost effective, especially after the numerous super weapon usage of Palpatine. They were still able to produce most of these at relative ease and cost. Also, a notable thing on this as well would be the reduced time in training people how to use them due to the similar control systems as the TIE Mauler. These tanks would see continued use leading up after the Battle of Endor and quite far into the Imperial Civil War. That is something I am planning to do a full series on later on, as it cannot just be covered off in one video. I learned this while trying to write a script for it. Now, the Century tank was used heavily by the Imperial remnant, and it did not become available to buy to the public, though one is seen as far as the Second Galactic Civil War, as part of Corellia's Security Defence Forces. My belief on this is that perhaps they liberated it from some of the Imperials and repurposed it and repressed it into service for their own defence force. Which makes sense. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Though my own personal thoughts on the Sentry tank are that it is a good use of resources for its time, especially during the Civil War when warlords were scrambling for whatever resources they could. In fact, you'd see a reintroduction of old Confederacy tech as well as various Old Republic designs such as the Acclimator class cruiser. I am going to go into detail about this later, but the Sentry tank does very much fulfill a role of having mass-produced, cheap-to-make vehicles, which fits into how the Empire did things quite well. But it has learned from the mistakes of the original light attack vehicle, and it does seem to have a lot more armour than the original. Let me know what you guys think, maybe get a discussion going down in the comments. Perhaps leave a like if you like this video, and if you want to stay up to date with all the content I produce, various gaming and lore stuff, hit that subscribe button and check the bells for notifications. Anyway, LoreSeekers, take care and have a good day.